Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today is another sad day for infantry line enjoyers, and it's quite a shame because this infantry line militia to champion is kind of a fun unit to play with, and it's something that I'd like to see a little bit more gameplay of. But unfortunately, it's just gotten worse over the last 3 months since I made the video titled The Unfortunate State of Infantry in AoE2. In that video, I just simply highlighted some of the downsides of infantry and why they weren't seeing any play in pro games, high level games. They were kind of not the most popular, not the best choice in intermediate level, and even in lower level games when I do coaching, infantry usually put the player at a disadvantage and it's not the most popular unit to go into, which is a shame because it is, a generic unit line and you'd expect more civilizations to want to go for it, especially those infantry civilizations that are actually good. But what ends up happening is that these strong infantry civs end up just being weak civs overall because their generic unit line, the militia to champion, is horrible, and it's usually not the go-to unit line that you want to just rely on and you want to play most of your games with. Now, the interesting thing is that infantry actually didn't get any buffs or nerfs since that video 3 months ago, so you'd expect that the situation is rather unchanged. But unfortunately, it's actually gotten worse indirectly. Now, notice I mentioned that they didn't get any nerfs, but they also didn't get any buffs, and that's where the problem is. Things that are good against infantry all got buffed, literally across the board. And it's not like the buffs were huge on those things that counter infantry, but it's just enough to where it's infantry were already down bad. Now the things that are good against infantry got a little bit better, and when's the bad news going to stop for the infantry? So let me run through a few points that makes infantry even harder to play right now compared to 3 months ago, and it really should highlight just how weak this generic unit line is. Number 1, and this is probably the most important point, is that Scorpions got way better. Ballistics affecting Scorpions is probably the number 1 thing that's going to help them against mass infantry in Castle Age and especially in Imperial Age with heavy Scorpions. Infantry usually were okay against Scorpions. Yeah, they got countered by Scorpions, but you can run away from them pretty easily. You can just kind of run around them quite easily as well. But now with Ballistics affecting Scorpions, infantry can no longer even think about engaging Scorpions unless you're 100% sure that you're going to overrun him, which is usually quite hard to judge from 7 range away. So Scorpions are now extremely scary for an infantry player, and I can only imagine that going for longsword pushes in Castle Age, which was already a fragile approach or a fragile strategy, that's going to be just way harder at the minute. And another thing is that once heavy Scorpion kicks in, 16 damage with ballistics or even 17 with chemistry and maybe even 8 range with siege engineers, that unit compared to the champion, it's literally not a competition at all. The heavy Scorpion will decimate the champion, and especially now with ballistics affecting the heavy Scorpion and with all the buffs that the heavy Scorpion got over the last year. Let's be honest, and let's not forget that the Scorpions have been getting buffed, and now the infantry is kind of suffering all of those buffs indirectly because the Scorpions are now the perfect answer to any kind of champion gameplay. And the second thing that is worth mentioning is that some of the generic counters against the infantry line, like elephants, got a little bit better because it's now harder to convert elephants, making them more viable in games, and so players are more likely to have elephants. And it's a very small buff. It's a very small buff to elephants. So it's a very small change to how infantry is viewed, but elephants is one of the best counter to infantry on defense in 1v1 games, and in team games, elephants can usually steamroll infantry. But elephants are now going to be played a little bit more because of their resistance to monks, and that's going to make infantry play that much harder to go for. And another small change that's worth mentioning is that now the crossbow upgrade and the arbalest upgrade are also made a little bit cheaper, which again is a very small change, but that, hurts infantry. And so really my question is, why are we changing the other things that counter infantry and giving infantry nothing? I have a theory though. I have a theory that there's some big changes coming to infantry and they're just not ready to release them, because honestly the balance team has been doing a very good job of making sure that things that are quite bad are making sure that they revamp them, that they kind of keep the balance tight, that things that are underperforming get a little boost to bring them back in the meta. So I have a suspicion that there are some big changes coming to infantry, but so far we haven't gotten them, and the other things are kind of just steamrolling our infantry, sadly. And the last thing I want to talk about here is that the market changes also negatively impact infantry play at higher levels especially. Generally speaking, when you want to go for something like a militia rush or a men-at-arm rush, you want to go for a little bit of pressure early, maybe follow it up with a range, and then try to get the castle age as fast as possible. That was at least one approach. You could go for men-at-arms and then follow it up with a full feudal, but usually your opponent would have more feudal age units because they went for like a fast feudal, archers, or scouts, and so you wouldn't be able to catch up in the feudal age pressure, feudal age army. So you just put a little bit of pressure because you're there earlier with your men-at-arms and your infantry. You followed up with a few archers or skirms, maybe one or two spears, and then behind it you had a really nice option to go for a market, mine a lot of gold, and then sell your 200 stone and also buy some food with the gold that you have, and then get your way up to castle age really fast, like lightning fast, and then go for some kind of all-in knight siege, castle forward, or just castle at home unique unit, whatever. Crossbows, you had cav archers, you had a lot of options. But now this market play in particular is really hard to do because the food price went from 130 base to 150 to get 100 food. So 150 gold to get 100 food is what the starting price at the market is now. So for every trade you do, you're basically 20 gold down compared to the previous patch. And although it might not sound like a lot, if you're going to use this strategy and buy like 300 to 400 food, which is like the usual or like the minimum that you'd buy, you're going to be down 100 gold, or maybe even up to like 130 once you factor in the idea that the market gets worse the more you buy from it. And so down 130 gold just to click up the castle age in that very short time period makes this kind of market all in play not the most viable. And so in the end, I really want to add something to this video to kind of just spice it up for you guys as well. I want to talk about how when you have things that get better in the meta, things that start to become more popular, it doesn't just mean that those things are stronger. It also means that the things that, that unit is good against get weaker, and that the things that counter that strong unit will become more popular. And that's how meta shifts happen. So in the case of infantry, the units that are good against infantry, when they get stronger, it's not like the situation will be, oh, now if I go infantry, my opponent will have a stronger unit. The situation will be the stronger units against infantry will be more popular, so my opponent is more likely to have those units before I even plan to go for infantry. And should I go for infantry, he's gonna have an easy decision to just double down onto those things that are stronger. And the most obvious example that I've mentioned is really that Scorpion. Since the changes of the Scorpion of being affected by ballistics, we've seen a lot more Scorpions in the meta, and I made a whole video dedicated about my thoughts about Scorpions and how they're actually much stronger than you might expect. People are going for Scorpions more often in Castle Age just to mask them up and deal with any kind of archer pressure, and this deters any infantry transition to begin with. So it's not like infantry, once they hit the field, are now going to be going up against stronger units. It's going to be like the stronger units that counter infantry are just on the field more often, which is why it's really difficult to get into the infantry line compared to the last patch. And again, this infantry line was already down bad. And one last thing worth mentioning now that I just remembered, this is the exact thing we saw with cav archer play as well. Cav archer play was super popular. In fact, it still is to some extent. It's really just one of the best counters to light cav, and spoiler alert, I made a video on this topic as well because I make videos on all kinds of things AoE2 related, and I hope you guys do enjoy them. But the cav archer meta was quite strong and is still relevant to some extent, but the Scorpions getting better, benefiting from ballistics, now made cav archers slightly worse because cav archers get counted by Scorpions, and Scorpions are more appealing for players. Therefore, Scorpions are more likely to be on the field, and should cav archers hit the field, then the defending player will have no problem and will have a better time investing heavily into Scorpions and getting that solid defense off. So as you can see, just because a unit line or a unit does not get buffed or nerfed, if the surroundings, if the environment of that unit changes, it could actually get better or worse depending on the changes around that unit. And I find this topic absolutely fascinating, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. What I would like to see is some changes for the infantry line and something that would just buff them for free, but not a huge buff. A huge buff could tip infantry over the line and make them broken, especially at lower levels, because infantry are quite cheap and spammable. So if you make them hard to deal with, you can just overrun lower level players and beginners way too easily, and the game can get quite unfun quite quickly. So just a small buff to infantry, maybe a couple small buffs, tuning them a little bit more than what they are currently, can really change the dynamic and bring infantry back into the meta, which is ultimately what I'd like to see for Age of Empires 2. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to check out my Patreon and my Twitch if you guys want extensive guides and to get better at the game. That's the Patreon, and if you guys want some live stream action, that's the Twitch. Links to both in the description below. I'll see you guys in the next YouTube video. Peace.